everyone. Welcome to our session. Our session today is titled Show Me, Don't Tell Me, Group Interviewing in the 21st Century. My name is Emily Moir, and I am the head of admissions here at our junior school at St. George's.
And joining Emily, my name is Reto Camenzind. I'm the head of admissions for our senior school, which runs from grades 8 through 12. Our thought for today, just to give you an outline, is we're going to introduce our school. We'll talk a little bit about the changes within our school environment. We'll give you an overview and introduce the group interview concept that we developed, and then also take some time to run you through the basic steps of how we run our group interview, how we score our group interview, and as Karen mentioned, towards the end, we're certainly leaving plenty of time for questions and feedback. So St. George's School is located in Vancouver, Canada. And actually today is one of those nice days where the sunshine outside our window here matches up with the photo of our campus that you're seeing. So we have two campuses, a junior campus from grades 1 through 12, a senior campus, grades 8 through 12. And in total we enroll 1,150 students, of which 115 are boarding students from over 19 different countries around the world. For the purposes of our group interview, we focus primarily on our day school enrollment, but for those of you listening that are predominantly boarding schools, you may find this useful, and actually at the end we're going to talk about some of the ways in which we're looking to incorporate this with our boarding applicants as well.
So here are some of our fine young men in action. And we wanted to start today with just a little background of how we came to the idea of incorporating something new into our admissions process. So these terms here in front of you, we all recognize these terms. They aren't just buzzwords or topics that we're exploring together at a conference. More research than ever is going in. I'm sorry, I don't know if that's bothering you again, but I will just leave it alone. So these words, more research than ever is going into how students learn and how we should teach them. And teachers are being trained in this cutting edge research as well. Teaching styles are changing, and teachers are incorporating more hands-on work, more project-based learning, and more online work. More information is available than it ever has been before. And it's cheaper at the big cost of free with online classrooms, with MOOCs, with blogs, with TED-Ed, etc. Students want more connections, and it's easier than ever for them to connect. And they want to connect with each other, but they also want to connect with students around the world and with experts in the fields that they're learning about. And so the traditional classroom isn't so traditional anymore. It no longer has four walls, and instead is a wide open collaborative learning space from which we share, and we're all participating in this learning space. So when we looked at that and we looked at these concepts and how education is changing, it gave us pause in the admissions process. And so we said, how are we evaluating our students who are applying to our school? So this is what we were doing. We were gathering information in an online application. Students were submitting a student essay either about themselves or a piece of schoolwork that they had done. We were using standardized testing, and we still do. We use the SSAT. We gather references, so both from an academic standpoint as well as a co-curricular reference, so coach or music teacher or something like that. And then the students were also invited to campus for a one-to-one or one-on-one interview. It was very me-centric, our process, and while we might have been asking students, how do you collaborate, or asking students about their core values, which is another thing that's really emerging in our school, the EQ piece of the application. The students still knew what we wanted them to say or what we wanted to hear. And so we questioned our process when we asked, how does what we're doing, these steps, how does this relate to these buzzwords, to what's happening in our classrooms? Does our admissions process evaluate the applicants on the skills and the mindset that we know are being used in our classroom and that the students are expecting as well? And do the students that we're accepting, do they have potential to thrive in this kind of environment? And how do we identify and pick the right kids? Is this process identifying the characteristics that we're looking for?
So a couple of years ago, we hosted the Ivy Plus presentation here at St. George's, and we had about 1,000 people from across Vancouver come and attend and listen to representatives from the Ivy schools. And at the end of their presentation, a parent of a grade 8 student asked the panelists, what can I do today as the parent of a grade 8 student to prepare my child to apply to your universities in the future? And the response from the representative from Harvard really stuck with us as a department, and it's something I'd like to share with everyone. He said the top 10 jobs in the world right now did not exist in 2004. So what does this mean? Well, it means we don't always know what we're preparing our children for. The key, therefore, is to expose your children to multiple skill sets, authentic experiences, and opportunities to interact with others. So if universities, and I mean ultimately the employment world, are expecting our students to be more collaborative, to have strong leadership skills, to develop strong character values, they're expecting students to be creative and innovative and to take initiative, then it's only logical that our K-12 educational environment is changing and has changed to meet these demands. So I'd suggest that, therefore, the key question is, are we in admissions, the people in charge of filling our schools, accepting students who will flourish in these new environments? Students who will not only flourish during their time with us in our schools, but will be successful in gaining entry into the university of their choice, successful in their career paths, and ultimately enriching our school communities as a strong alumni body. That's a photo of one of our grade 7 wings. So a few challenges that we faced, certainly changing expectations from our teachers. What they were hoping to do within their classroom or what they were planning to do within their classroom required students with a certain skill set. Some other challenges for us here within Vancouver, we have a strong interest in our school. It's a very competitive admissions process. And so students are coming in with really highly polished statements, strong and extensive references. They're often coming in very rehearsed for their one-on-one interview. And we have a really connected community. So regardless of how many different versions of our interview forms we might develop, we've got students who come in and go, oh, but you didn't ask me this question. Or they're coming in and they already know half of the questions that we're likely to ask them. Another major challenge for our department, as I imagine it is to everyone listening in today, is limited time. During our peak admission cycle, October through February, we only had so many people, we only had so much time to work through our whole process. So I guess we reflected on our process and we said, who's really making the decisions here? Is it the cram schools and the tutors who are results orientated that are influencing our decision making? Are we being driven by academic acceleration versus what we're really looking for as applicants with EQ? And are the students who are being successful within our previous model actually students and parents who are counterproductive to our school's educational philosophy, which values a much broader student than just those that can prep and deliver the lines that they think we expect them to say? So for us, we didn't just come up with this on our first shot, this concept that we'll be introducing about the group interview. We had a lot of different ideas to start with. I remember Emily and I sitting around looking at TED Talks and wondering whether we could take snippets of a TED Talk and incorporate it into the individual interview and get some feedback, but that seemed like it would be very time-consuming. We bounced around the idea of doing a different writing sample, maybe a creative writing sample, but fortunately SSATB changed their writing sample and we felt confident that we were getting a good creative writing sample through that assessment. Like I imagine many of you listening, our interview questions change time and time again, but still we felt that we weren't getting everything that we needed to know about applicants through that. So we came up with what we label as a group interview, and we'll be introducing that next. So you might ask, what is a group interview? Well, it's a group-based, lateral thinking style problem-solving exercise and presentation. Now, many of you might be thinking, students all coming in, sitting next to each other on a panel and being forced to answer questions in front of each other. That's not it. In fact, it's a lot more fun than that. We invite boys in small groups to come to our campus and tackle a what-if scenario. They come up with solutions individually, they work together as a group, they present as a group, and then they have a chance to interact and ask questions of each other afterwards.
So let's look at that again. What is a group interview? It's basically, for us, it's a 3-step process. It's the setup, which takes about 15 minutes or so to prep for your kids coming in. It's the actual group interview, which is the meat of the interview that happens. And then it's the time that we spend as a team going over the applicants. So we'll start with number 1 in red there, so the setup process.
So we typically invite 6 to 8 applicants in together. They're typically in the same grade, but we do make an effort to ensure that we don't have students from the same group in each session. In addition to the applicants, we'll often invite teachers, head of grades, principals to join us as well, although we find about a maximum of 3 adults works well. And then we have a number of different materials in the room, so students will have whiteboards and scrap paper and timers and name tags and everything else that you might imagine in terms of material.
And then the group interview process happens. So this is that, like I said, the meat of what's happening is during this kind of 45-minute time frame. So let's take a look at what that is. So students are invited into the room. We do student introductions. We usually do a little bit of an icebreaker since they don't know each other. They will have met someone on the admissions team already because we do the individual interview first. So they'll have met at least one adult. And then we put them in small groups, so groups of 3 or 4. We read the instructions which we're also going to be doing with you in just a few minutes. And we find that that's a really important piece because we have a lot of students who might be learning English still. So if they're receiving the information both written and orally, that we found that's helpful. Then we give them their mission, and the mission is their what-if statement. And we make sure that they understand that, and then they're given some time to work on it alone. So they do some individual brainstorming, they do some group brainstorming, they design their group presentation, and then they give their presentation to the other group and to the adults in the room. Then the last step, number 8, there is the peer evaluation. So we allow them chances to ask questions and then to give each other some feedback as well. So let's look at the consistent instructions that we read aloud. And we will give you all just a few minutes as well to read these instructions aloud. So this would be at the top of everyone's paper, and then they would have one mission at the bottom. So we'll give you just 2 or 3 minutes. So that was 1 minute in total. And again, you'll be receiving these slides. So if you did miss something, you'll have a copy of this. And we're also happy to share our handout. We'll send it to Karen that we actually gave at the SSATD that has a copy of this on it as well. So we'll make sure to do that too. So that is the instructions. And actually boys applying to grade 6 and boys applying to grade 12, everyone receives consistent instructions. So the same thing is given to every student applying. And then at the bottom, you'll see mission 1 and mission 2. They will each group will have one mission, so they won't see the other group's mission. But these are 2 examples of missions that have been given in the past, and we will give you some time to look at these now as well. So that's about a minute or so on these. And students would then be given, again, the time for individual work. So they would have a chance to, brainstorm how they would approach the problem. They would have a chance for some group work. So after the individual time is up, they're able to get with their group members and work together and then design their presentation. And then they would have a chance to present to the other team that's in the room. And we really say that how they choose to present is up to them. So whether it's very content-based or whether it's very creative, kind of theatrical-based, it's really up to the students how they want to present their approach to their mission.
So the third step in terms of review and evaluation, typically after the group interview finishes up, takes about 15 minutes. So during the group interview, we're taking notes throughout each section. Towards the end, we're making our summative comments, and after the students have left, everyone who's observed meets as a team. We make a comprehensive set of notes for each student. We type those all up, and we enter them into each student's file within our database. This is an example of the rubric that we use for the group interview. So while it's going on, during the individual section, we'll take a few notes. Particularly during the group work, we're taking extensive notes on how students are working with one another. And then also in the final section, when students are presenting and providing feedback and questions on the other group's presentation, we're taking notes and evaluating how they've done on that portion. At the end, you'll notice the bottom has a section sort of classroom personality, and we'll look to look at 1 or sometimes 2 or 3 different categories that students may fall into in terms of the types of classroom personalities, and we look to value a worker bee as much as we would an enthusiastic ideas type or a take charge leader.
So we'll look at this rubric again after we watch a little video. And unfortunately, GoToMeeting doesn't have the capability to share the video with you directly here. However, Karen has sent you the link by email, and you should be able just to click on the YouTube link and watch the video. It is public. So just remember, please keep your GoToMeeting running and open. We can't hear you while you're doing this, and so we'll give you a few minutes to watch that, and then we'll go from there.
All right, so we're back. Hopefully that's given everybody enough time to watch the video or at least get a very good sense of what one of our group interviews looks like in action. I know I always get a good laugh from that group as they talk about getting a free walker. I always get a good kick out of that as well. Just so you know, that was a group of our current students. So we had a few of our current boys come in and do that video for us over the summer. Due to photo releases and privacy agreements, we weren't able to do that with a live group of applicants, but we were thankful that a few of our grade sixes heading into grade 7 were happy to come in and do that video for us. So you've now hosted a group interview. Now what? This is a sense of what our rubrics look like towards the end. It would have evaluation in each of the 3 sections. And again, it would, at the bottom, give a bit of a categorization of the type of classroom personality we observed for the students on that session.
So how did this bring value to the applicant profile? You might have seen some numbers on there, but it really isn't a quantitative data. It's qualitative data. What we see from this is we see how students collaborate. Leadership skills or leadership potential even comes out. We see their character values, another important thing that we're looking at a lot in the admissions process. We see how they're creative and what kind of ideas come through, and then who kind of takes charge. And you need someone to take charge a little bit to get things going. We have certainly had group interviews where they've been quite stale. So it gives us insight into some of the students' skills and allows us to see their potential to perform at our school or even to interact at our school. By giving them a lateral style thinking question, one similar to one that they might see in our own classrooms, we can just further determine to see if they might be the right fit for our school. So while we don't decide for or against an applicant solely on the group interview, it does give us more insight into how they might, what they might be like here at our school and in the 21st century environment.
So our findings after, I guess, 2 years of running with a group interview incorporated into our admissions process are as follows. Time. Time was a big concern that both Emily and I had going into this in our department as a whole. And we've actually found that working in 1 or 2 of these sessions each week for an hour on a Thursday morning has not been a huge undertaking or huge difference from years past. We were surprised that some really strong applicants going into the group interview actually really struggled with this exercise and often allowed us to have some discussion with the parents of the child heading into being enrolled here at the school about what they can expect within this environment and how their son might need to adapt and how as parents they can support their son. We often, during our decision-making process, if we had 2 applicants who on paper were very, very similar, this group interview helped us in deciding between 2 very similar applicants. It also helped us in ensuring that we had balance within the makeup of the intake years that we have here at the school. And I think it really provided students with a setting in which they were having fun, felt relaxed, and which was similar to what they were used to. I don't know many 12-year-old students who have sat across from an adult for half an hour and talked about themselves ever before. Yet, we're pretty confident that all the students and all of our applicants coming into these group interviews have had some type of school experience and some kind of group work that would be similar to this.
So the future of the group interview. After our first year, we knew we needed a lot more topics. We had students coming in and they would say, oh yes, I got the island topic, and they would have brainstormed some of their ideas already. And I think even though we needed more topics, even if students came in and were kind of prepped for it, they weren't prepped for the other things that their fellow students would bring in, so the other ideas. We found you couldn't prep for the group interview in the sense that you didn't know what the variables that other people would bring into the equation. So in that way, it has been good in kind of defeating that cram school thing we have going on here in Vancouver. We modified our rubric, bringing in a lot more classroom personalities, and making sure that we weren't just valuing the leadership quality, which is a very visible quality. We needed to make sure we were valuing all the other different kind of the silent worker or the really inclusive person who had a lot of EQ in the equation as well. This year we used iPads in the group interview, so coming back to that topic idea, we modified our topics to use technology. Students love it. We had pretty consistent good feedback that they enjoyed having the option to use it, but we found that the topics needed to be focused with a specific point where we needed them to use the technology, so it wasn't just a time waster. And then Reto and I are talking a lot about whether these can be used in a boarding student's application. We have students, like I'm sure many of you do, who are coming either from a setting where the internet isn't very strong, or they might not have webcam or something that makes it a much bigger challenge. We also run into privacy issues on that front in terms of, if we use Google Hangouts, that's hosted in the US, and in Canada here we actually aren't supposed to require certain technologies from our students. So we're really open to suggestions and feedback, and if you decide to launch something, we would love to hear what you go with. And just always open to feedback about the group interview in general. So
I guess for us, if there's one thing we hope to leave you with and that you take back to your own schools and departments for reflection, it's the desire to discover who our applicants genuinely are. And for us here at St. George's, that meant having them show us, not just tell us. So thank you very much for carving out the time to join us for this webinar this afternoon. We'd love to hear from you. We'll be sure that to make sure our contact information is available, not just here on this screen, but also afterwards. If you'd like any of the slides that we presented, or if you'd like any of our forms or our rubrics, just let us know. We're happy to share. And I think at this point, Karen, we'd like to open it up to questions and see if the folks who have been listening in have questions for us.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you so much. And to everybody listening, I will put a link to the YouTube video in case any of you were unable to link to that and see that. You'll find a link on the page as well as the recording, Reto and Emily's slides, and any other materials that they want to send along to me. The first question is, if you have 6 to 8 students, how do you keep track of each student as you evaluate them? Does each adult get assigned a few students, or have you found a productive way to keep track of 6 to 8 students and 6 to 8 evaluation sheets?
Yeah, that's a great question. What we typically do is we start out, ultimately every adult in the room is evaluating and watching all students in the room. And what we typically do is one of us will start out watching one group and maybe spend the first 5 minutes listening to them, and then we'll switch. And so throughout the entire interview, we'd have a chance to observe every student, but making sure that we're spending enough time with one group to see how discussion and dialogue evolves. It's not something that you can jump back and forth between both groups every minute, because you're not going to get a full sense of it.
And I think it's not generating pages of notes. Like when I come from a teaching background, and certainly when you're teaching, little things will come out throughout the group. So you're making more kind of abbreviated notes about each thing, and each applicant doesn't need, a whole long list of, or a whole long paragraph of that. So, and it's something that I think develops as you go through them. So we've gotten a lot better at, watching one kid for a few minutes during the individual, but making sure that each child is looked at during the individual process. So give it a try, and it'll develop, I think, pretty organically for you.
The next question is, what grade do you begin your group interviews with?
We start them with boys who are applying to grade 6. For us, that was also the year that they started taking the SSAT here to apply to our school. And prior to that, we do on-campus testing. So they would actually be able to come to the campus, and we try to build in activities during that time where we see how they work with other people. So this was that's why we started at grade 6 as well.
Okay, thank you. Tiara is asking, how much do you tell the applicant in advance about what the group interview consists of?
Yeah, we want to make sure that students come into it feeling relaxed and feeling confident that they're able to take on the task at hand. So we would typically share with them during their individual interview and when we chat with the family that during the group interview they can come in, they'll be doing a little bit of work on their own, they'll be working with a group of 2 or 3 other students, and that they'll be asked to solve a problem and present on it. So they've got a sense of what the format is, and in fact one of our YouTube videos on our website, they can actually listen to a little 4-minute blurb of our overview of it, but we don't give them any insight to the content or the questions or actually the problem they're going to be solving. But we want to make sure they're comfortable and they're coming into it with a sense of the format.
Thank you. Sharon is asking, how do you engage the parent in the interview process or provide time to answer parent questions?
So that happens, and I'm speaking specifically for grade 6 to 12, that happens during the individual time. So the student is interviewed first, and then we'll invite the parents in, and we have a parent interview that happens as well. Thanks for bringing that up. I realized we didn't talk about that. So the parent interview, again, it's something that we don't score and necessarily, but we make a lot of notes to make sure that they're engaged in the process and they understand what the school is about, etc. So thanks.
Mimi is asking, she says she loves the missions. She's wondering how you came up with them, if your office came up with them or if you had a resource for those.
You know, we each, Mimi, first of all, thank you. Of course, we share 2 of our favorites. We as a department have come up with the topics so far. It's always challenging. We found that some topics work really well. Other topics that we've developed and used a time or 2 we felt weren't as accessible for students. And we've naturally found that some of the topics work better for grade 6 students, but maybe not our 11s and 12s, and some topics work better for the older students. So I think as we head into the summer, I know at the senior school level, we're going to be likely to engage some of our more creative and innovative faculty members and bring some new ideas and energy into developing those topics, because it is a challenge to come up with a brand new debate or a pool of questions each year. And dare I say, I think we might be starting to tap the limits of what we can come up with within our department.
Okay, thank you. I just want to speak to the last topic that you answered briefly. Sharon just sent a question. Is the student with the parents when you do the parent Q&A?
For us in our process, we typically interview the student on their own, and then we typically have the entire family in when we're chatting predominantly with the parents. And I'm not sure for those people listening whether everybody would do it similarly or whether schools interview the parents just on their own, but we typically have the student with their parents for that part of the conversation.
And at the junior school, we do the same. And for my, I mean, this is a little off topic, but for my younger students, I find that it's important to see how the child interacts with the parents when they're in the room. But at the grade 6 and 7 level at times, and I think Reto would have this too, at times parents ask to speak with us privately, especially if they want to talk about results or their son or what they're looking for specifically and hoping that our school can offer. So there's flexibility with that as well, but we always will try to have the parents in with us, with the whole family.
Okay, thank you. I have several questions here about the one-on-one interview that you said you still do. Mia's asking how long are those interviews? Do you interview the parents as well? We also had a question about whether the individual interview is done on the same day as the group assessment and whether it's pretty much a traditional interview or something different.
Yeah, those are all great questions. So I think it's important to note that this group interview concept has been added on top of all of the other aspects that we've been doing for years and years here within our department. So a student would, once their application is entirely complete and we have all the documentation on hand, they'd come in for their one-on-one interview. And those will typically be in around half an hour with the student. And then they'd come back for a second visit on a second day to do the group interview.
So in total, the individual interview when they come in would be half an hour with the student, and then I usually give about 15 minutes with the parent interview. So that's 45 minutes for an individual, and then they would be asked to come back on a different day for about an hour for their group interview.
Okay, great. Thank you. Nick is asking, I'm sorry.
And Karen, someone asked if we had substantially changed our individual interview.
Mm-hmm.
And really we change questions here and there, like I think anyone probably does, but it's still a lot about, the student and their school and their experiences and their extracurricular things. So it is still pretty traditional.
Great, thank you so much. Nick is asking, how do you balance having the group interview without creating another stress on the applicant in an already high-pressure process?
Nick, that's a great question. For us, when we speak with students, and actually I get more feedback about this from parents afterwards, what we hear from students is they had so much fun on their group interview. I know Emily and I look forward to it in our calendar when we get a chance to do it in this setting. The students get lost in the assignment. They really enjoy it. It gives them a sense of what it would be like to walk through our doors and be a student here at our school, and the ways in which we're asking students to interact with each other. So I actually find the group interview does a great job in bringing a real fun element into our process and a real opportunity for students just to relax and have fun with a project that's more so in their scope and something that they're more comfortable with than maybe other elements of the admissions process.
By far, it's the thing we get the most positive feedback from. So, I mean, interestingly, I think it's almost become a differentiator between our other schools locally that kids talk about the group interview. So in terms of, marketing, in one sense, it's almost marketed itself. Kids are excited to come in and do that.
And if I can dovetail on Emily's point there, when we presented this at SSATB's annual conference back in the fall, some of the feedback that we received from participants then was that, in their particular situation, they might not be in a position where they're looking to this to help differentiate between applicants that they're accepting or not accepting, but rather it helps them position themselves as a school that is not just putting out the rhetoric of 21st century learning, but actually starting to give their applicants a taste of that style of learning through the admissions process. And in that way, it would be useful for their departments.
Okay, thank you. Tiara is asking, do you ever mix grade levels in the group interview?
So at the junior school we do. 6s and 7s come in together, and I will typically invite 3 6s and 3 7s, or just kind of depending on who's applied at that time. So we run these starting, I think we started in November and we finished our last one in March this year. So they happen about once every week or once every other week, and sometimes you just have to based on who has applied. Up at the senior school,
at most we'd have 1 year difference between students. Typically, if there is a year difference, it would be that we have a group of 4 grade 9s and a group of 3 grade 10 applicants working in the same room. Very rarely would we have students in different grades within the same group working together. So at most we look for a 1 year difference, so that a grade 8 applicant isn't intimidated walking into a room with students who are 6 inches taller and applying to grade 12.
Okay, thank you. Corey is asking if you could give an example of a topic that you give to students who are applying for the upper school, grades 9 to 12.
Yeah, Corey, if you want to shoot me an email, I'd be happy to share a few more with you. Off the top of my head here, we do like some of the technology questions. So we find that, I know we had one group last year, and a number of the students from this group were actually admitted to the school. Afterwards, I went, you guys need to go pitch that to Apple. I think you've really got a marketing plan that's really finely tuned towards senior citizens and selling them Apple products. That would be one that we often use at the senior school level. For us, most of our topics from grade 8 through 12 would be quite specific. I can't think of one that we particularly only use for our 10s and 11s, but I can go through them. I can send you a few that we use across the board, 8 through 12. I think where we mostly differentiate is the ones that are used here at the junior school for 6 and 7 versus the senior school.
So for instance, we have one at the 6 and 7 level about, it's called Buddy the Dog, and it's about this dog that needs to be taken care of in your class. And how would you go about, incorporating him into the school, and what are things you need to think about, and just much more of like a younger kind of approach. But we've found that actually all the topics have worked, besides that Buddy the Dog one, have worked pretty well. Once in a while, I think we've noticed vocabulary you'll need to modify and change, but just to make sure it's understandable for each grade, but otherwise they've worked pretty well. But again, Corey, we're happy to share some with you, and hope if you develop some, it'll go both ways.
We had one in particular where there was a catastrophic asteroid coming towards Earth, and students had to collaborate with NASA and the communication plan they were putting together. We found many of the grade 5s applying to grade 6 struggled with catastrophic asteroid.
And a communication plan.
Excellent. Vanessa's asking, what differences have you noted in the classroom and the personality classes have taken since doing the group interviews?
So that's a great question. And ultimately it's what we're hoping for. But Vanessa, so the boys who are currently accepted this year are the first kind of group. And it's amazing the feedback actually that we're getting. So parents or teachers are saying, they're currently, in professional development for 21st century skills and group work and boys-specific learning, so a lot of project-based learning. And they have just been saying the EQ is high from the boys who are coming in. They are good team workers. They are enthusiastic about learning, and they're good participants in school life as well. So I think that's something that can't be undervalued. They're not just about me, myself, and I, and that's really what we want here at our school, is boys who participate in our school life. So I think, I can't say we're 100% on. I wish there was that magical way to find a kid who was 100% right for your school. But I think it's helping, and I think the conversation is starting, and it's generating a lot more conversation between admissions and our faculty as well. So they're becoming more interested in our process and wanting to participate in these group interviews and come and see what we're doing, whereas before it was a little less so. So I think it's been positive on the junior school end for sure, and senior school. Reto's nodding, senior school as well.
Thank you. The next question addresses students who may not be quite as leader-focused in a group dynamic. A student that may not be as outgoing in a group setting, but kind of turns on in the classroom. How does that impact this process?
Yeah, that's a great question. For us, we want to make sure when we're watching these that we're not just looking for that, take charge leader who's going to come in and be vocal right off the bat. We want to make sure that we are valuing, and a category that we've increasingly jotted down in our notes this year is leader by example, and valuing that student that is showing leadership in another way, valuing the students who are coming in and including students. That's one of the things that I've really enjoyed seeing, is students that will look to a student who's maybe less vocal, or look to a student who hasn't been engaging as much at the start of it and say, what are your ideas? Or what do you think about that? And that inclusiveness is something that we're really placing a high value on. I think within a one-on-one setting, students do get a chance to really share with us everything they can possibly imagine that they want to tell us when the attention is solely on them. And so this is an environment where students do need to find their voice and do need to be vocal and engaged. And in a way, that's also what we are looking for in our students, the students who are going to be engaged and involved, in whether that's asking a question in class or whether that's being involved and getting involved in clubs or extracurriculars, we are looking for students who aren't going to be passive, who will come in and take charge and be involved.
And we also encourage them to ask questions of each other during the feedback time. So that might be a chance where a boy who's a little bit more naturally shy would be given a platform to ask a question, or a boy who is a little more naturally shy to receive a question. So after they've given each other feedback, Reto and I or the other members who are observing, if I see a boy who really didn't bring a lot to the presentation, I want to know if he's capable of bringing something. So I will ask them a question directly. So sometimes we'll pose questions to the group and say, what did you guys think about this? Or other times we'll say, Michael, why did your group decide to do it this way? Or why did you choose that? So making sure that you're seeing if they're capable of thinking differently. And there's difference between engaging with the topic and being a shy person versus passive and really unengaged and poor attitude and disrupting other people in the group. And so the ones who are just a little bit more naturally shy, it is easy to differentiate between that.
Okay. The next question is, what process do you use for interviewing an international student to draw the most out of them?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do travel quite extensively as a department around the world to most continents, in fact, almost all continents. And so preferably we look to meet with students one-on-one in person. At this point, the group interview is not something that we were taking on the road. Even in areas where we would have 6 or 8 applicants from one city internationally, we haven't incorporated it yet. So we're still looking to the one-on-one in-person interview abroad. When that's not available, we do it via Skype. Again, one-on-one using Skype. And in a few areas where we don't have the kind of internet connection, I did an interview with an applicant in Botswana this year, we would default to a phone interview at that point. What we find with some international locations where students aren't able to write the SSAT is also then, at the very least, having them do a writing sample with us while we're in that Skype call as well.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, how did you get the decision makers, for instance, head schools, to agree to reformat the process to a group interview?
You know what, I think that's something that, I remember when SSATB surveyed directors of admissions and talked about your roles within your school. We're in a very fortunate position here in our school in that our director of admissions at Gordon Allen is really empowered to make decisions within our department. And as a department, we receive a lot of encouragement from the senior management team within the school that if we have new innovative ideas that we want to move forward with, we do receive a strong level of support. Our director, who we report to, as I mentioned, Gordon Allen, sits on the senior management team. And so for us, it wasn't about drastically changing and reformatting. It was about enriching and adding to it. And we were in a position where I don't think for us there was ever a big question of whether we'd be able to do it because we felt that we've always, we're always empowered and put in a position to add. I think for us the only consideration was could we pull it off? Do we have the time? Do we have the time to set up the meetings, to book the appointments, to actually execute this additional piece that we were adding onto our format?
Okay, great. Janice is asking a question sort of about timing. When families go on a tour of the school, do they have the same day the personal interview and the parent interview? Can you sort of address the timing of the specific pieces of your interview process?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. It does vary a little bit depending on whether students are applying to day or boarding here at the school. For our day families, they would typically be coming by one of our set open houses or information sessions. That would be their first visit to campus. It would be more in a large group setting rather than an individual tour. They would then be doing their online application, following up with supporting documents, booking for that individual interview on one day and the group interview down the road. That's the majority of our applicants. That's how the timing would work. For applicants who are coming in from out of town, we do typically do this more so in one day. So they may have the school visit and the individual interview, and if we can get them to come back a day or two later and join in on a group interview, that's ideal. But we don't always have group interviews at that specific grade level available on the 2 days that a family happens to be in town. And that's why, from a boarding perspective, at this point, we're still quite limited in terms of the number of boarding students that are doing this group interview.
Okay, thank you so much. We're at the end of our question session. If you would like to just make any closing remarks, and then I will go ahead and wrap everything up. Feel free to do that.
Well, I think just a big thank you to everybody who's taken the time out of their day to listen. Again, we're certainly open to further discussion. If anybody has questions, to follow up with us afterwards. And just like to thank you, Karen, for facilitating and for setting this all up, and to SSATB for giving us an opportunity to share this beyond just the conference that we presented at back in the fall.
So thank you. We look forward to connecting with you all, and appreciate you devoting some time to us today. So thanks so much.
I also want to thank our audience for tuning in, and a special thank you to Emily and Reto for providing us with this insightful webinar. Just a reminder, a recording of this presentation, as well as Emily and Reto's slides and any other, their YouTube video and any other resources they pass on to me, will be made available on the webinar page in the professional development section of admission.org. I'll send everybody a link to that page most likely tomorrow. So thanks again, and have a great day.